Wouldn't it be great if there's some kind of tool that could automatically discover the network as well as identify specific vulnerabilities on systems that it discovers? Well, there are many tools like that. They fall into the category of vulnerability scanning tools. And although there are many different tools we could use, I'd like to demonstrate one of the most popular ones out there, and that is Nessus. A vulnerability scanning application is a double-edged sword, and that's because we can use it, which is great. We can proactively identify weaknesses, whether it's at our firewall or our servers or our systems, because we want to find vulnerabilities and correct them, or at least mitigate those risks before the attacker does. And that's where the double-edged sword comes in. If there's an attacker or a hacker that's using those same types of vulnerability scanning tools against our network, the attacker can discover the weaknesses and vulnerabilities and then take logical steps to exploit those vulnerabilities or weaknesses. And those vulnerabilities and weaknesses could be either due to some inherent flaw or failure in the operating system or application, or it could be a weakness or a misconfiguration of those systems. And one of the most popular vulnerability scanning systems out there is called Nessus. And there's several different flavors of it. There's a free home version. And what I would encourage you to do is go ahead and download this for your lab environment and practice with it. And let me walk you through exactly how to get that process started. In our lab, we're going to use our Windows 10 machine to go ahead and download Nessus. We'll register it, and then we'll go ahead and start using it for scanning the network. So here we are at the Windows 10 computer. Let's go ahead and launch Chrome. And let's go ahead and do a Google search for Tenable. And it's tenable.com is where we want to download Nessus. So we'll click on the link for tenable.com. We'll go to the link called Products. On the left, we'll select Nessus. Then there's a sublink called Download. We'll scroll down. And here we have links for the home version. And there's other versions available for corporate use as well. So for our purposes, let's go ahead and download the Nexus home version. So we'll click on Download. We'll scroll down. We'll pick our operating system. This is Windows 10. So I'll select Windows. And then I'll select the 64-bit version for the application and download it. We'll click on Agree, and that's now being downloaded to my Downloads folder. We then click on it to start the installation. Now, you'll notice this is signed, which is a very good sign. We'll go ahead and click on Run. And then we click on Next and Next and OK to go ahead and do the installation. Now, as part of the installation, it's going to ask us to register our implementation of Nessus. And when we do register our installation of Nessus, they're going to send us an activation key for the plugins. So I'm going to cancel this install because I've already installed it on this computer. And once I registered, I supplied my email address. They emailed me a key that I then plugged into Nessus that allows access to the plugins. And once I did that, it did some downloads and away it went. I was also asked during the installation to set up an administrator username and password that has access to the Nessus application running on this computer so that not just anybody can connect and run the Nessus scans. The administration interface for working with Nessus on this local host is port 8834, and it's using HTTPS. And because my computer has a self-signed certificate, my browser can't verify the certificate, and that's why I have the HTTPS warning. Now, currently, I have a scan that I started, and it's been running for over an hour. So while that continues to run, let me share with you how we can set up policies for what we want to include in a scan. If we click on the Policies tab here, and we click on New Policy, we can specify the details for what we want to include in our vulnerability scan. Now, they have some templates that are already here. In fact, they have lots of templates that are already here. But if we wanted to start, for example, with an advanced scan, we could click on Advanced Scan, and I'm going to call this Our Custom Policy, and then we can go ahead and save it, and we can actually tweak it and configure it, and then use it as a future scan. So if we click on Our Custom Policy, we want to customize it. And then for our custom policy, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of options that we can select. For example, if we click on Discovery, we can specify the host discovery method that we're going to be using, whether it's ARP or TCP or ICMP or UDP. And under port scanning, we can specify how we want it to be done. Under service discovery, there are several options here as well. So this tool has lots of ability to be customized based on exactly how we want it to behave in our environment. So once we've set up a policy, we can go back to Scans. And if we want to create a new scan, we can click on New Scan. And then if we scroll down, there's our custom policy that we just created. We can launch that scan with all of those parameters that we set up as part of that profile. Probably one of the best things to do would be to take a profile that already exists as a template and then start from there to customize a profile that you want to use for your network. Or in the case of a hacker or attacker, they would simply create a profile that is going to give them the information that they want to collect or try to collect from the network. So to create a new scan, all we need to do is under scans, we click on new scan, select the policy we want to use, and that scan would start. Now I have a scan that's currently been running for over an hour, and I told it to go ahead and do an advanced scan against the entire network. And hey, it's done. That's great. So about 10 minutes ago, this was still running, and it had been running for at least an hour, and that little check right there indicates that it is now complete. If it was still running, there would be some kind of a movement or activity there indicating that the scan is still running. Now to see the details or the results of that scan, we're simply going to click on the scan itself. It's called test. So we'll click on that. And here's identified that it had found 12 hosts with over 97 vulnerabilities collectively across those. Now, some of those vulnerabilities are informational in nature. That's this blue. And we have the critical in red. And we have some shades in between for high, medium, and low. So this one device at 192.168.1.1, it's got some issues. It's got some red, it's got some orange, it's got some yellow, and some green. So that's critical, high, medium, low vulnerabilities. So it's got 59 issues that are showing up as informational, which are not necessarily risks or vulnerabilities. To see the details of those, we can click on that host. So we'll click on that host. And currently it has this column sorted based on critical, high, medium, etc. So if we want to see the details for that, we can simply click on the critical link here. And it will tell us, according to this banner, the remote web server is running a version of OpenSSL that is no longer supported, and blah, 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 blah. It also indicates how we could go ahead and remediate that by upgrading to a version of OpenSSL that is currently supported. If we want to go back to the vulnerabilities, click on the vulnerabilities. It's a hyperlink. Or if we want to go back to a list of all hosts, we can click on the host hyperlink. We can also click on the vulnerabilities here on this tab to show us the vulnerabilities. We can click on remediations to see the recommended remediations regarding those vulnerabilities. So most of the vulnerabilities it's found are related to OpenSSL, and then there's a bunch related to Apache as well. Also for this scan, it's also indicating when it started. So it started at 404, it ended at 517, and the target was the entire subnet of 192.168.1. And if we clicked on the history tab, it would simply show us a history of the scans that have been run through Nessus. So if we wanted to create a report, for example, based on this scan, we could select that scan that's been completed, and with it selected over here on the top right, we'll use the drop down for export, and we could export it either as Nessus or HTML or comma separated value or a Nessus database. So if we want it to be HTML, we can simply click on HTML. We'd specify the type of summary that we want. Executive summary is fine. Click on export, and then it downloads that HTML to this local computer. So if we clicked on that, that would go ahead and bring us up the report, which is pretty cool because the hyperlinks work in the report. So if we wanted to go to 192.168.1.1, we could just click on it right here, and it would take us to the details regarding that individual host. It would also give us information on the plugin ID. The plugins are downloaded as part of the Nessus application. That's why the activation key is so important. So we clicked on, for example, this plugin ID of 78555. It's going to give us more details on what that plugin detected, in this case, OpenSSL being unsupported. And if we scroll down, it'll give us more details regarding that vulnerability. So what I would encourage you to do, my friend, is I would encourage you in your lab environment to download Nessus, get an activation key for home use, scan your network, and then find out what vulnerabilities show up and take some time investigating each and every one of them. And that way you can be more comfortable in working with a vulnerability scanning tool like Nessus. In this nugget, we've discussed the concept of a vulnerability assessment tool and provided an example of Nessus in doing exactly that. Hey, thanks for joining me in this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.